Reaching the highest level in any sport is incredibly challenging. It doesn't mean we don't respect these champions, either, even if we're highlighting them for their lackluster title reigns. Some people are excellent fighters. A few are gifted only once in a generation. But that's when the wheels came off when it came time to try to carve out a successful term as a champion. Some of the worst UFC champions ever are these ones. Carla Esparza. When it comes to the two-time UFC strawweight champion, Carla Esparza, the journey is well and truly more important than the destination. Because on two different occasions, Esparza has failed to defend her belt, losing both times in one-sided fashion to divisional greats like Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Zhang Weili. She holds the strange distinction of having beaten the same fighter, Rose Namajunas, twice to win UFC golds, 7 years apart. But for as much as Carla's resurgence was impressive overall, we can't look past her record against rising contenders or even her lackluster performance during her second fight against Rose Namajunas, making her the perfect fit for this list. Menne. The very first UFC middleweight champion also happened to be one of the least known. The name Menne might not mean a lot to newer fans of the sport, but in 2001, after losing his last fight under the ring's banner in Japan, the UFC opted to sign Menne and give him a shot at promotional gold. At UFC 33, Menne scored a decision win over Gil Castillo, ushering in a new era for the 185-pound weight class. So how long did that era last? Well, about 3 months before Murilo Bustamante showed up and TKO'd Menne to begin his own title reign. BJ Penn welterweight. Can we call BJ Penn a bad welterweight champion? Well, based on our criteria, he sadly qualifies. Don't get us wrong, Penn was a true prodigy of mixed martial arts. A fearsome boxer and world-class grappler who was able to move up in weight and shock the world by finishing Matt Hughes, stealing away his welterweight title in the very first round. It was a major moment for the Hawaiian's legacy, but unfortunately his opportunity to defend his title never came, as he left the UFC behind him for over 2 years due to a contract dispute. He would of course eventually return, winning lightweight gold and becoming one of the greatest champions in that division. But his run as welterweight king certainly left a lot to be desired. Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade won the title under the most unlikely of circumstances, and then lost it in similar fashion. At UFC 237, the champion at the time, Rose Namajunas, looked like she was putting on an absolute masterclass against the challenger, outstriking the powerful Brazilian for the majority of their first fight. But then, after she latched onto a Kimura, Jessica Andrade found her moment, lifting the champion into the air and then slamming her down on her head for a knockout victory. It was as odd of a title finish as you'll ever see, but Jessica was still highly regarded within the sport, and rightfully so. Her reign, as it turned out, wouldn't last long though, and the rising Chinese phenom, Zhang Weili, finished her in 42 seconds to win UFC gold in front of her home country. It was a 3-month title reign that was over as quickly as it began. Vitor Belfort. Vitor Belfort is one hell of a fighter, and his longevity in the sport can never be taken away from him, TRT or otherwise. You could even make the argument that his early success in the UFC 12 heavyweight tournament was just as good as becoming a UFC champion. But sadly, actual fight that saw him capture UFC gold was not a legitimate victory. At UFC 46, a scene from Belfort's glove caused a cut on the eye of the champion, Randy Couture, leading to a 49-second TKO stoppage. Of course, when the two rematched at UFC 49, Couture was able to win back his belt with a third-round stoppage, restoring order in the division. It was unfortunately a short reign, and in many ways, a controversial one. But the larger picture of Belfort's career was not defined by this saga. Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez remains one of the biggest fan favorites in lightweight history, a true competitor who always comes to fight no matter how great the odds are. At least that was the case in most of his bouts, until his first title defense came at UFC 205. After winning the belt with a stunning first-round knockout of Rafael dos Anjos, Eddie Alvarez was set up for a fight of monstrous proportions. A Madison Square Garden headliner against the sport's biggest star, Conor McGregor. Unfortunately, Eddie just couldn't make it happen on fight night. Whether it was the matchup, the occasion, or a combination of both, Alvarez just didn't seem like himself when he faced off with the notorious one, losing his title to a perfect display from Conor McGregor. He is a legend of the sport, make no mistake. But this was definitely a bad night for the underground king, Josh Barnett. What's worse than one failed drug test? Well, for Josh Barnett, the answer to that question was 2 consecutive failed drug tests. The first came following his win over Bobby Hoffman at UFC 34. Strangely though, He was only given a warning and was then paired up with the heavyweight champion Randy Couture in his next fight, which he won by TKO, becoming the youngest fighter to win the heavyweight belt. Of course, Barnett would once again test positive for a banned substance and was ultimately stripped of his newly won title. Barnett has one of the worst track records for PEDs in combat sports, so the fact that his lone capture of a UFC title was marred by his own reliance on steroids wasn't exactly shocking. St-Pierre. Middleweight, perhaps this is a slightly unfair entry, but one we couldn't help but include. St-Pierre's run as a welterweight champion is easily one of the greatest title reigns of all time, and after an extended leave of absence in 2013, his return to the UFC was always going to disrupt the natural flow of whichever division he ended up in. But this time, middleweight was the destination for GSP, and his one-time appearance in the weight class, all things considered, was a massive success. With the title in his possession after a third-round submission of Michael Bisping, disaster struck as St-Pierre retired from the sport due to health issues, vacating the title almost immediately after winning it. Contenders like Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero were forced to wait indefinitely, and eventually the division moved on without its newest champion. Conor McGregor. How could we make a list of ineffective champions and leave out one of the sport's biggest offenders when it came to leaving his contenders high and dry? Though Conor McGregor became a double champion in both Cage Warriors and the UFC, he never once made the walk as a defending champion, due in large part to pursuing a lucrative boxing match with Floyd Mayweather, which held up both the UFC featherweight and lightweight divisions. Sure, Khabib Nurmagomedov eventually won the lightweight title and beat Conor McGregor in what fans viewed as a title unification bout, but in reality, Conor McGregor was either stripped of or vacated every title he ever won before he defended it. It's certainly a unique stat, and it's probably the reason he still thinks he's the champion. Germaine de Randamie. Ducking a contender as a champion isn't the strangest thing in the world. Sure, we would all rather see fights happen when they need to, but in the end, as MMA fans, we generally get what we want. However, Germaine de Randamie's reign as the women's featherweight champion was an especially weird case. She won the belt in a highly controversial fashion against Holly Holm, and then flat-out refused to fight the top contender, Cris Cyborg, due to her past PD transgressions. She was so adamant about not taking on the Brazilian powerhouse that she allowed herself to be stripped of the belt. She still remains an excellent fighter, who would have no doubt been an interesting challenge for Cyborg, something that to this day makes this entire saga nothing short of baffling. Nicco Montano. Like our last entry, Nicco Montano's title reign didn't result in an actual defense of her belt. And just as the UFC appeared to be feeding Germaine de Randamie to the fearsome Cris Cyborg, Nicco Montano was signed up to take on Valentina Shevchenko in her first defense after winning the title in the Ultimate Fighter 26 final. In truth, not many gave her a real chance at beating Valentina Shevchenko. So when she suffered kidney failure during fight week due to a bad weight cut, most people agreed that she likely saved herself from a one-sided beating. Unfortunately for her, she was subsequently stripped of her title. Then, when she tested positive for a banned substance shortly after, her title reign was all but dismissed as part of flyweight canon. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.